This video contains spoilers for the Falcon and Winter Soldier Season 1, Episode 1, and potential spoilers for future episodes if our theories become a little too accurate. I feel like I don't need to say that anymore because given our extremely poor WandaVision track record, I don't think any of our audiences need to worry unless we somehow redeem ourselves in the 6 weeks. We are extremely honored to be joined once again by Professor Carnes today, and from now on, really exciting news. Professor Carnes will become a regular guest to different theories, discussing all kinds of MCU theories with us every week for this entire year and the foreseeable future. New week, new show, new questions, and new theories. This week, we experienced the premiere of the highly anticipated The Falcon and a Winter Soldier. Our discussion will be different yet similar to WandaVision, but we're not quite done with WandaVision yet, as our episode on how WandaVision connects to the multiverse trilogy will be out this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. So everyone, please welcome to a brand new episode of So to start us off with, our list is basically 0 right now, so we have to build off our list. So what we will do is that we can have Professor Carnes maybe lead the discussion first, and then if we have any questions, we can answer those. And as our old rules, at the end of this discussion, each of us will lock in our theories to go into next week, and then 6 weeks later, we'll see if we win or fail like we did last time. So yeah, Professor Carnes, if you would like to get us started.
Sure thing. Well, so I guess just to remind everybody of sort of what we just watched. So this is the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We start, I guess the whole thing is set 6 months after the return from the blip. So we're now solidly into sort of normal life after the half of the universe has been restored. The series kind of opens with the sort of MCU action that I kind of expected from WandaVision. Like we start out with, Sam Wilson is working with the Air Force and they're trying to stop a terrorist organization called LAF. There's a hijacked plane. There's lots of action. There's lots of explosions. We meet, I think for the first time, First Lieutenant Joaquin Torres. And we see the big tension that's probably going to run through this whole show, right? Is Sam Wilson being uncomfortable with the mantle of Captain America. In this episode, he actually gives it away. He gives the shield to the US government, only to have the shield and the mantle of Captain America passed on at the end of the episode to an imposter, to someone we're, I think, supposed to really dislike. In between, we see Bucky Barnes is in therapy. We see, the Flag Smashers, this new terrorist group that Torres is investigating. And we see some sort of new superhuman villain, the apparent leader of the Flag Smashers. So I think there's still a ton of mystery here. Like I still have lots of questions. It's not a grand mystery like WandaVision. It's not a grand sort of what is even going on type of story. But that's okay. Oh gosh, and I almost left out. We see Sam Wilson returning home and him and his sister trying to get a small business loan and getting denied, which is a really poignant storyline that I think is going to be very significant this season. So that's the kind of setup. That's my contribution at this stage. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of theories. None of them as crazy as WandaVision, but I'll stop there and see, what did I miss or what theories do you all have?
Now, I would just like to get this out of the way, but I think we have possible Mephisto appearances. I'm just joking about that. We are no longer talking about Mephisto. Or maybe he's just going to show up in this show. They're like, hey, you thought he's going to show up in WandaVision, but no, he's going to show up where you least expected. But I'm not putting any money on that. But I think one question that I did have is just first, although we see that Sam explains the reasons for why he gives up the shield, he's saying that he doesn't think he can take the responsibility of being new Captain America. I still have a lot of questions on why exactly he gave up the shield, because we see a government official talking to him in Rhodey later on, telling him you made the right choice by giving up the shield. So I was wondering, is the government putting pressure on him to have him give up the shield?
I think it's entirely possible. I feel like the government would never waste an opportunity to gain a symbol as powerful as Captain America's shield. I mean, we see the whole tension about the Accords and legislation like it hasn't gone away. So it doesn't surprise me that they were keen on using that symbol as a sort of weapon to sort of operate their agenda with, as we see, U.S. agent.
No, yeah, it makes sense maybe to hire someone that they know they can have complete control over. Someone like Falcon, who has already been involved with Captain America and the Avengers and has already established himself, might not be as easy to control as someone else. So it could make sense when the government wants to hire someone more like a puppet that they could use. That could definitely make more sense.
Oh, but this goes against my research showing that the MCU has a really balanced depiction of government overall. Like the government is, not just like this nefarious sort of foil. So I think I'll be disappointed if they go that direction in this season. Even alongside this, it does look really nefarious, Sophia. Like it does look like, oh, they may have done this bait and switch. They told him he was giving the shield to the Smithsonian, and then they're going to turn around and create US agent. But I really hope that's not the case. I really hope there's a more complicated story here. And it's not just government is the easy sort of lame bad guy in the story.
But speaking of bad guys, I think we should all acknowledge just how awesome it was to see Batroc again in the beginning opening action sequence. I think a returning character from Captain America, the Winter Soldier, who is pretty iconic for, his jumping kicks. It was pretty awesome to see how they adjusted the sort of fighting style that you see in the opening sequence of Winter Soldier, and see adjusted to the Air Force and Sam's aerial abilities. Because I mean, the whole action sequence like screamed espionage thriller. It was awesome.
And I think a small detail they added that was really nice was that in the Winter Soldier fight scene, Batroc had his own theme when he was fighting Captain America. And because this one's music is composed by the same guy that composed Winter Soldier and Civil War, Henry Jackman. So we see a return of a lot of themes from the Winter Soldier, including that scene with Batroc on the Lumerian Star in the Winter Soldier, which I thought was super cool. But the one question I have regarding Batroc is that we know that a Falcon and Winter Soldier, at least from what we are seeing now, feels very stylistically and narratively similar to the Winter Soldier and Civil War. It almost feels like a sequel to those movies. So we know that in Act 1, the first battle of those movies, although it seems slightly unrelated to the later stories, we get revealed that they're related to the stories. Like, for example, Batroc's whole thing is related to Hydra's whole scheme to frame Nick Fury. And the Crossbones fight is the catalyst that sort of ignited the Sokovia Accords. So what do we think this opening fight is all about? And how do we think it's going to factor into the later story?
I had a much simpler take on the whole thing, which was just that they're giving us a really solid Winter Soldier style action sequence to ease us in. So Harry, I had not thought of that as being something that's going to have lasting implications for the show. I really thought the Flag Smashers were going to be, kind of one of the big bads, but I actually hadn't considered that they might be using that for the entire series. I just thought they want to give us what they didn't give us in WandaVision, which is good old fashioned, really well done MCU, high heart rate action. But I hadn't considered that maybe this is going to be more carefully woven through. So I for once don't have a crazy prediction.
I think I have one, although it's a little early to bring this up, but I think I've been thinking about this ever
Can I write this down? When can I start writing them down? Because I'm always taking notes.
You should probably write this one down because I'm pretty
okay.
I'm going to lock this one in. It's going to be a pretty elaborate one.
First locked in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
And it's going to be a longer one, so I apologize beforehand for the amount of writing that you're going to do for the next few minutes. But first of all, I don't think this story will be simple at all. And there's one reason for that, and it's Zemo. I mean, if we saw Civil War, we know that Zemo is a guy with a really complex plan. He's not a simple guy. He doesn't do things simply. And Zemo didn't appear in the first episode, which to me feels very suspicious. I feel like he's got to be part of this whole story that is going on. So what exactly is Zemo up to? I think there's several evidence that we can find in the trailer. So the one quote that Zemo said in any trailer was that superheroes are a problem. And I need to destroy superheroes to finish my work. That is, related to Civil War. He blames superheroes for what has happened. Now, if you look at Zemo in the comics, he becomes Citizen V, and he actually assembles a group of his own superheroes who are kind of really villains turned into heroes, kind of like the Dark Avengers that Norman Osborn had, kind of like a sinister version of the superheroes. So I have a feeling that this is going to be his ultimate plan in this show, is to create this team of supervillains turned superheroes to make people lose faith in superheroes, but also to create his own regime. Why is he called Baron Zemo? Like, where did this Baron title come from? I think he's going to have some kind of ruling regime going on with these supervillains. Now, who are these people that he's going to recruit? I think the first and most obvious choice is Batroc the Leaper. He didn't die in the first episode. which means he is definitely coming back. And we saw some set photos of him not in that valley scene in the first episode. So I think he is coming back. And I think lastly, the person that he is working with is US Agent. I think he deliberately had US Agent, who was a villain, as the new Captain America to make people lose faith in superheroes. This sounds very similar to what the Joker did in The Dark Knight, having people lose faith in the hero by turning Harvey Dent into a villain. And I think this is exactly the kind of thing that Zemo will want, because he says an empire that topples from within, that's dead forever. And this fits with that whole scheme. The Avengers are going to tear themselves apart from the inside once again, because they're just consisted of a group of supervillains.
How did you get this all the first episode?
Harry.
I really just saw it as a fun action scene.
I see where you're coming from with the whole point about Baron. I mean, the whole Baron Zemo thing it's an entirely different thing in the comics, because this is whole stupid my great grandfather was Baron Zemo. It's not we're not gonna talk about that. But I think it would be a reasonable way to adapt it to the Marvel universe for them to sort of frame it as this supervillain regime come to take over from the new hero. So I don't think it's the most insane theory that you've ever said on this show. It's plausible.
I can see that because, I mean, I think one thing we did see set up pretty clearly is people appreciate the heroes, but on a very superficial level. Like, the banker can't place Sam. It takes him a long time. And then he, does this immensely, this disgusting, like, let me take a selfie with you while I'm denying you a small business loan. And so, I mean, there's a lot going on in that scene for sure. But I think one thing is just revealing how paper thin people's sort of attachment to the group that literally saved half of the universe. And now it's a gimmick, now it's a joke. And I think that maybe that's what they're trying to set up, or that's one of the things they're trying to set up in this first episode is we're going to see faith in the superheroes just fall apart, because it's pretty worthless to begin with. If all it is a vague recognition, and you want to take a selfie with someone before stabbing them in the back. So I kind of buy that aspect of the theory, Harry, right out of the gate.
Speaking of villains, we were talking about the Flag Smashers earlier and how we think they're going to be like a through line through the series. So the leader of the Flag Smashers, the one who sort of beats up Torres is really surprised at his strength when the whole altercation goes down. And I remember when he's on the phone with Sam later, there's a moment where Sam, I think, asks him, do you think he's, and then trails off and then goes, never mind. And I think based on that interaction, what if the leader of the Flag Smashers is like one of those Winter Soldier extras from Civil War?
So you're saying that because in Civil War, Zemo said that he killed all the Winter Soldiers. So you're saying that he didn't kill all of them, then he left at least one of them alive.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
I kind of want to lock that theory in.
Oh, that's a good theory.
Considering that Zemo's a guy who has contingency plans for his contingency plans, I mean, this is so unexpected because they expected him to revive the Winter Soldiers, but he didn't. But what if they thought he didn't, but he actually did? That actually makes so much sense.
My theory is, and I'll lock this in now because it's really crazy. My theory is that it's Zemo, that he actually retained some of the super soldier serum and gave it to himself. Basically said, yeah, heroes are bad, but I'm going to use their power to execute some larger plan to undermine them. There's so many unanswered questions about everything that happens to Zemo between Civil War and now. We don't even know whether he was snapped away or not. So he's had a lot of time to scheme. He's probably come into contact with a lot of other, villains potentially. So I don't think it's out of the question that he'll kind of go Red Skull a little bit and want all the power, sort of try to make himself a super powerful being in order to carry out his plan. Well, so on that note, I actually wonder now that we're thinking this could all be a grand scheme orchestrated by Baron Zemo that will eventually lead to a supervillain team. That kind of links up to our unanswered question from the beginning, which is why does Sam Wilson give up the shield? What transpires between, the handoff at the end of Endgame and the handoff at the Smithsonian? And yeah, maybe it could be that over the course of we have 6 episodes total for Falcon and Winter Soldier. It could be that we see Baron Zemo laying an intricate plan to get Sam Wilson to doubt himself, to doubt his worthiness or something like that. And I'd be really interested to see how he pulls that off. He's really good at, sowing discord and messing up superhero teams. And so maybe he will, maybe we'll get some insight into what happened. Maybe it's more than just Sam Wilson is really humble and reluctant to take on his friend's, sort of identity. I'm going to lock that in. I want to say that's my theory. I'm going to stick with that one. That's probably my least crazy theory so far. Baron Zemo is the one who, subconsciously made Sam Wilson doubt himself enough to give up the mantle of Captain America temporarily, I hope. I want to also register, I'll be really mad if Sam Wilson is not Captain America at the end of this series, because he was Captain America at the end of Endgame. He's been technically Captain America ever since, as far as I've been concerned. And so I'm going to be really upset if there's any doubt as to who Captain America is after these 6 episodes.
I definitely think on a separate track from Professor Carnes' theory about why Sam gives out the shield, I think I'm going to lock in a theory that the reason that he decides to give it up is because of Steve's death. Because it's one thing to accept it when your friend's giving it to you for the first time, but it's one thing after he's gone. And Sam does say in this episode that ultimately the symbol belongs to him. He says that in his speech. I do just want to say that as a prospective psych major and pre-med student, I do get kind of nerdy whenever there's a therapy scene in anything ever. But I do want to say that I think it's very interesting that they really looked at Bucky, the Winter Soldier, and decided, you know what he should do? He should make amends. But I guess in regards to Bucky's arc about the guilt he feels about killing this sweet, sweet man's son, I definitely want to lock in that there's going to be a very dramatic scene where he finds out that Bucky's the one responsible for his son's death. How Marvel's going to use that arc, I don't know. I don't know what the reaction is going to be. I think that's the most interesting point there.
I think it's interesting that grief and guilt and therapy are figuring so prominently in both of these shows. So WandaVision, we have a quasi-therapy, we deal with grief and loss, and we have a quasi-therapy, episode. And then, we get to the first episode of Falcon the Winter Soldier, and we have like almost a Sopranos style, we're going to see this really tough guy character doing therapy and resisting it, of course, and being a terrible patient. And I've been puzzling over why that is, like why grief and loss and guilt and therapy are so, they're kind of front and center in both of these shows. And I don't have a sort of clear sense of, what that conveys or what that signifies and about the moment we live in or whatever. But that's been on my mind since I saw that scene, or, since we all, since Friday. And so I'm curious what you all think about that.
No, yeah, I find it interesting that right now with these shows, we're getting these side characters where all these like traumatic stuff happened. But now this is like, these shows are making me just think of like, oh my God, of how traumatic it was. Because, with the movies, you don't have time to stop and look at every character and see like what is happening with them and all these big events. Like we're all focusing on like big picture with everyone in the Avengers movies. You don't have time to like stop. So these like TV shows with WandaVision and Winter Soldier, it's like a time to like stop and see if like what happened in all these movies, like what it's actually done to them. So it's just taking it slow and like kind of like process that like trauma. So yeah, I do find it interesting how like, yeah, these shows are taking like this like psychoanalysis of these characters who have gone through so much and just kind of stop for a second. And yeah, that therapy session kind of had some parallels with like Agatha Harkness and Scarlet Witch. And I do, and I don't know if this is a theory, but I definitely see myself also probably tearing up over Winter Soldier in the next coming episodes of something similar like Scarlet Witch and Agatha Harkness. Literally the therapist, like that therapist sucked. The therapist literally just straight up told like Sam, like you need people, like I'm like the last person you called. I
really did kind of laugh during that scene because I was like, wow, this therapist is a little shady.
Right? That was so much.
I was like, wait, the man's had his whole like self-will and bodily autonomy stolen for like 90 years. And the first thing she was like, you know what? I think you are healthy enough to go out and make amends with the people whose like loved ones you killed. That's a great idea.
No, that is the worst therapist. I feel like there should be a disclaimer, like this is not how therapy actually works. So that doesn't like scare people off from professional counseling, which is really, really helpful. And nothing like someone constantly threatening you and then pushing you to do crazy things that don't make sense for your situation. So yeah, that seemed, I mean, that whole exchange was strange. And I wonder how much, I mean, you know, to the extent we're thinking about, you know, Baron Zemo having planted people in the lives of some of these heroes, I wonder whether we'll see more of this therapist and see that they potentially have some sort of nefarious role. They're either working to disempower, you know, Bucky, or, you know, sort of working to somehow execute Baron Zemo's scheme. So maybe I'll lock that as one of my kind of far out predictions, is that the therapist is somehow connected to one of the big bads in the series.
I think it makes a lot of sense if she were to join Zemo's team of supervillains, superheroes. And I would also like to kind of go back into that emotional storyline. I really enjoyed how the first episode kept their stories separate and didn't have them meet one another, because I think we now really established that I think although Sam and Bucky, they say they hate each other, I think we're going to see at the end of the season that they really need each other. Because we saw in the first episode when Sam's sister is feeling a lot of trouble, she's feeling a lot of stress, Sam was trying to, you know, calm her down, saying, you know, everything's going to be all right. I'm going to figure something out for us. And you can, that was a really sweet moment. And I think Sam's going to have that exact same conversation with Bucky, saying, you know, everything's going to be all right, kind of like what Steve is doing to Bucky. But I also think Bucky's going to do something to Falcon to instill a sense of confidence in him to become the new Captain America, because Bucky is very close to Steve. They were like there since the beginning, and I think he knows how Steve thinks, and Steve tells a lot of secrets to him. And I think, as we can clearly tell from the MCU movies, maybe Bucky's going to have a conversation with Falcon that said, like, you know, Steve, before he traveled back in time, he told me he had zero doubt that you're going to be the next Captain America, maybe even a better Captain America than he ever was. And I think that would be a really, really emotional moment for us. And this is the moment I want to see between these two characters.
Yeah.
Harry, you should lock that in now. That's a beautiful scene. I really hope we get that.
One last question that I wanted to ask everyone. We already talked about this before. Who is John Walker, aka US Agent? Is he going to be a Hayward type villain, just straight up evil government dude that everyone just hates throughout the season? Or is he going to be who we thought Hayward was going to be, a more nuanced villain? And in the end, you kind of feel bad for him in the end.
Honestly, I have no evidence for this, but he has a really irritating face in my opinion. I feel like he's going to be that ingratiating, irritating villain.
It's hard not to dislike him after. I mean, that scene is just such a feeling, or I felt such like regret and betrayal and you know, Sam, what have you done? You know, you've given this to some stranger. And so I think it's going to be, but that almost seems to set up a redemption arc. Like, we dislike him. We don't know anything about him. Hayward was bad from the beginning. We knew he was bad. And I tried to create a fiction in my head, or a story in my head, about how that would all be, you know, redeemed in the end. What has US Agent done wrong? Other than wink, other than kind of look like the guy from Up. Like, he hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't harmed anyone. So I'm going to, you know, I'll lock in a prediction now. I think redemption of US Agent. By the end, you know, he's going to be, you know, a hero, or he's going to be somehow redeemed. So this actually runs contrary to Harry's theory that this is sort of some, you know, big supervillain team that's going to come together. I actually think he's going to be sort of innocent bystander who's kind of redeemed, Phil Coulson style, sort of, you know, someone who seems like an impediment at first, but is actually one of the good guys. So I'll lock that prediction in now.
I think US Agent will act as a government puppet. That his fighting supervillains is probably going to be like making movies. Like, maybe even the government even orchestrates some of those villains fighting to make them look good.
I also kind of saw him as just like a puppet, someone misguided that they're just using.
I feel like it's definitely plausible that he's a puppet. I think it's very plausible that he has decent intentions, perhaps, but is simply misguided. But then again, it's hard to just look past the sheer, like, vapid just nature of that smug smile that he gave. It reminds me of the Homelander smile, except less sinister, of course. But it's just something about it. It just, I don't know.
I think in the end, he's going to sacrifice his life.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
And Yep, and it's going to be Phil Coulson all over again. It's going to be, oh man, we really misjudged this character. We thought they were kind of square and lame, and actually they end up being like the hero who's willing to sacrifice it all. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm so sad that U.S. Agent is gone, and it's going to be like a heart, like it's going to be a scene that tugs at the heartstrings. And you're like, oh, how misguided I was after episode 1. I was wrong to judge him based on his little wink or whatever. Like, so that's my prediction is. I'm going to just really go all in on U.S. Agent this season. Firm commitment.
I mean, if 6 weeks later and you're wrong, you're basically wrong 2 times with the same theory. I do think the Thunderbolts is happening, though. When we talk about the supervillain team, I think all the foundations are there. So there are some rumors going around. They're saying that Marvel is doing something like a Thunderbolt as an answer to the Suicide Squad and the Boys, because those turn out to be really interesting, like superheroes are actually supervillains. And we do see several characters who can actually be in this team. I mean, Zemos is a pretty obvious one. There's Batroc the Leaper, who might be part of Thunderbolts. A lot of people have speculated that Erin Kellyman is playing Songbird in the MCU instead of Flag Smasher, that she's going to become that character who was part of Thunderbolt. You have Taskmaster, who can literally copy superhero moves. Yelena Belova could take over as Black Widow, and we don't know if if she's a questionable person or something like that. Also, the most important person of all, Thunderbolt Ross. I mean, he's got to be up to something, and he has the motivations, right? He's like, these superheroes are so unreliable. I'm going to create my own government puppet superhero who's going to listen to me for Sokovia Accords. I think that's something that Thunderbolt Ross is going to do.
I buy it. I would love to get Thunderbolt Ross back in the mix. Such a great character, great casting. And we never see Red Hulk. So, fully support this theory.
And also don't forget, there could be other characters who could be in Thunderbolts, like Ghost, who, we don't know where she is.
Sure. That's a really good point.
She's not really a villain, and she was part of the Thunderbolts in the comics. And I think they're going to use her. I mean, that could be a really cool lineup. You have Zemo, Taskmaster, Yelena, Thunderbolt Ross, and Ghost. I'd watch that movie. So that was a lot of theories. Some of them I think overall we're going on a more plausible trend right here, but we also have our fair share of crazy theories. But now let's lock in our theories into what we think is actually going to happen. I'm going to lock in the theory that I think Zemo's up to something, and I think is manipulating everyone in the background, and I think they're developing the Thunderbolts. I'm locking in the theory about Bucky and Sam having a really emotional conversation that's going to make us all cry. I think it's going to be something really great.
All right, I guess I'll go ahead and lock in that I think the supposed leader of the Flag Smashers may be a stray Winter Soldier that Zemo lied about killing. I will go ahead and lock in that Bucky's going to have a dope knife fight that is a callback to the first Winter Soldier movie. And I will also lock in that there will be a very emotional scene in which we see the culmination of the arc of Bucky's guilt as to killing his friend's son.
I will lock in, even though this wasn't specifically my theory. I'm really liking the therapist up to something no good, because honestly, she was just too horrible. Like, having that, it just kind of makes sense. And the way she was just like manipulating him, that she's up to something. So I'm going to lock in that there's more to this therapist than we thought.
I'm locking in U.S. Agent is going to be the hero of the series. So I'm just, you know what? If at first you don't succeed, try again. U.S. Agent all the way.
So thank you everyone for tuning into another episode of Different Theories. We are so excited for this series and to see where it goes over the next 5 and 6 weeks. Hopefully our theories, we have a higher success rate this time. And don't forget, we're having another episode about how WandaVision links to the multiverse trilogy coming very soon this weekend. And don't forget that this Friday, March 26th, is the deadline to submit your films to be featured in the Duke Independent Film Festival, which is really, really cool. It's open to all graduate and undergraduate students. If you have a film that's less than 20 minutes long and you think it's awesome, please submit it. We love all kinds of films.